Hi, everyone. I'm Patrick Dane. We're here showing some of Enchanted Kingdom from BBC Worldwide. Just so you know a little bit about me, I had a history working on some 3D films in the past and then sort of accidentally became a journalist, and 2.5 years later, I'm still accidentally a journalist. I thought it would be nice for all of you to introduce yourselves. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Neil Nightingale. I'm, despite what it says up there, I actually, Myles and I produced the film and Patrick and I directed it. I'm the creative director in my other role of BBC Earth, which is BBC Worldwide's production outfit for creating content beyond TV, if you like, to complement everything the BBC Public Service does. And that's how this project came about.
Yep. Hi, I'm Patrick Morris, co-director of Enchanted Kingdom with Neil.
And I'm Myles Connolly. I'm actually the line producer, not the director, but I was thrilled to see that I'd been given a massive promotion when I walked into the room. To be honest, it's not a promotion that I would want. So.
Well, I mean, I guess there's not a lot out about what Enchanted Kingdom is, so I thought you might just tell everyone what actually Enchanted Kingdom is.
Yeah, sure. It's, as you say, it's produced by BBC Worldwide. It's a film for the cinema, a 3D film, as you'd expect, being here. It's a journey through Africa, an immersive journey, a journey to give audiences the most intense experience of nature they've ever had in the cinema, as intense, frankly, as if you were there. But it's more than just a kind of a real journey. It's also a journey of the imagination to discover that nature is more extraordinary, more magical than you ever thought, than you ever imagined. And so we journey through 7 different magical realms, each with their own character, and each with their own characters, and each with their own lesson about life. And as you can imagine, a film with that kind of aim, with that kind of philosophy for audiences, 3D was absolutely the heart of our thinking about this film. From the very first day, it was conceived as a 3D film, and I know we'll get into talking a lot more about the sort of practical aspects of that later on. But this idea of giving audiences this sort of totally immersive experience, both visually but also through sound and so on. It's a film that has a very light narration that guides you on this journey, rather than being in the fashion of a very factually, informationally heavy film. So you learn through the experience rather than being told a lot about what you're seeing. So it is as if you're going actually on a journey. And there's nothing like nature for 3D. I think this film, I suppose, was conceived around the time that Avatar came out, and I think it's no accident at all that James Cameron chose that wonderful natural setting of those jungles and mountains to put, and with all those weird blobby things and so on. They look like come from a coral reef. Yeah. I mean, the inspiration for that whole environment was the natural world, and I'm sure, again, that was very much part of his 3D thinking, and so the real natural world provides the most amazing opportunities.
Why do you think that is? I mean, why do you think that natural history has such a prestigious history in 3D, and why does it lend itself so well?
Well, I think for a start, it's the environment. In a jungle, in a coral reef, when you're journeying through environments, you have all these kind of depth cues. That's the way we sense the world, and therefore, if you want to put people in that place, it provides lots of opportunities. Spectacle, it's all about depth and volume and surrounding you and overwhelming you, and that's what 3D is good at.
But I think too, just quickly, fundamentally, people talk about film and the film experience as a form of escapism, but the reality is that we're humans, we're animals, and we want to engage with our world, and the natural history of the 3D environment allows us to do that in a way that we don't engage watching 3D in The Hobbit or Avatar or something like that. Those are clearly fantasy worlds that we'll never inhabit, but to have a natural history experience it really brings it home in 3D.
We gave an awful lot of kind of pre-thought to those realms, those different environments, about how we could maximise that 3D experience, and also in our choice of animal characters that we could get up close to and eye to eye with and really engage with.
I think that opens quite an interesting thing. Was how are you using convergences in these films? So I mean, are you going for something that's more naturalistic, that's going to put you there, or do you sometimes push that convergence to make it a more dramatic scene?
Well, it's both, isn't it? I mean, I think the number one rule about 3D that I've learned is never keep it the same, because your eye adjusts and it just disappears if it's all the same. So it's utterly dependent on the nature of the scene and the story, your story you're telling. So, for example, in the journey, this is a journey between and through these worlds, and we use it in a very dramatic way, quite extreme sometimes in the journey, when you plunge into the forest and fall down the tree and things are coming at you, or you plunge through the surf into the water. It's that sort of gravity moment when the spacecraft's exploding, everything flying off. Whereas, when you're in the rainforest, it's much more behind, and a feeling of being there in great depth into the distance. So, and again even with intimacy, there's a wonderful shot of a face of a gorilla, and I think just after the line, they're some of their closest living relatives. That's all you need to say, and somehow that shot is just slightly coming out the screen, but there's depth, and you just feel that gorilla character is real. It's just not on a plane. Yeah. It's a real individual, and you relate to it so much more strongly.
Well, I mean, I guess we can go into the first clip now.
Do you want to set it up, Neil?
Yeah, we're showing Flamingos first.
Yeah.
As Patrick said, we chose the subjects very carefully, because actually you can't shoot a 3D wildlife film like you just shoot Planet Earth or Life or anything, largely on long lenses, with a lot of dramatic, risky behaviour, because that's difficult. That's difficult to do because you don't have the ranges of long zooms, and B, as we'll know, that would give you a pretty crap 3D experience. So we chose subjects where we could get close and wide, and obviously when you've got hundreds of thousands of flamingos, they create a great spectacle. They give you great depth cues. They, you get close. You feel amongst them, and it fitted also into this story we had of sort of this idea we have for each of the realms, which is kind of overturning perceptions of the natural world. And so this is part of a world we call the underworld, which starts off with Ngurungaga volcano, which is possibly the most active volcano in the sort of Great Rift Chain, and goes through Dalol, which is this incredible sulphurous world. And of course, one of the products of this great volcanicity in Africa is these lakes with pretty much poisonous water, but microscopic creatures can grow in this very alkaline water, and attracts up to and sometimes over 1 million flamingos. So the whole idea of this realm is, out of the hell of volcanicity actually comes love, because these birds come here to gather together in a love dance and find a mate. And so not only did it fit the sort of the 3D requirements of being able to get close to a big spectacle and feel, it also fitted this overall idea of entering these worlds and seeing the world from a different perspective.
I mean, the other thing to add is in the filming of it, there were a lot of very classic natural history approaches. To get close to the flamingos, we had to use hides. We had platforms to try and get a higher angle to get the spectacle. So, yeah, it's very much a combination of all those principles with all the latest technology, and the field skills as well. In that, out there, these birds only come to this lake once a year, sometimes less than that, and so it's all about timing. And we had a lot of patience and some great research and a lot of help on location about when it looked like the birds might do this spectacular dance. So there are all these different considerations. before going out to film, and storyboarding as well, very carefully, the sequence we wanted to capture so that everyone on the team had a really, really clear vision and an ambition with it.
Let's come back to the storyboard. Why don't we roll the clip, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the plan.
Yeah.
I'm going to move because I tend to be a wall in front of 3D screens. This may be the most risky thing I've done on this show.
Yep.
Not really. You or me?
That's pretty impressive. I mean, I've been on 3D sets, and I know that these rigs are very small. I mean, they're quite cumbersome in some ways. So how do you go about planning that and getting it while also containing that wildlife and making sure everything's going to plan, as it were?
Yeah, as I mentioned briefly beforehand, we put a lot of careful research and pre-production into choosing the best locations and getting the right time of year for an event like that. When we arrived there, we checked out the lake, looked at all the different potential filming positions, and then placed the hides. But it involved, for a scene like that, kind of at very first light, getting down there, getting the rig set up in the hide, cabling back to the recording station in the vehicle, and then putting the time in, waiting for the birds to settle and start to dance. I mean, thankfully, on a scene like this, they'd started at a fairly comfortable hour, at sort of 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, which gave us a couple of hours to prepare. But an awful lot of planning has to go in the storyboard, but also deciding, obviously, in advance of each filming day, so everyone's really clear exactly what shots we're targeting. It's not like kind of perhaps more 2D long lens work where you're able to be very reactive and pick up that behavior very quickly. This needs a lot more pre-thought and planning to be ready for when that action actually happens, to have everyone absolutely sort of switched on and ready to get it. So, yeah, it's a question of working our way very carefully through the storyboard and having absolutely kind of key priority shots.
And I think
target.
One of the key things, we talk about storyboards and shot lists and all that stuff. You have that on any film. Typically on natural history films, you have that, and on day one, minute one, it kind of goes out the window because the animals either didn't arrive or they didn't do what you were expecting, or you didn't account for the rain that would come that morning for the first time in 20 years, so on and so forth. But what it does allow you to do is make sure that your entire team are starting from the same place, and so when you adapt as a team, as opposed to one cameraman who said, well, I thought we should just go shoot ants that day instead, or something like that. So it really helps you just maintain the illusion of control. This isn't Gravity or Hobbit or any of these shows shot on a sound stage, on a studio lot, where you have control, and at 12 it's break for lunch and we're back in 30 minutes. I mean, we're out there probably 14, 16 hours a day, and we're just reacting nonstop from the first minute. So it's an incredibly difficult task because you really essentially have no control, and yet you have goals, you have things that you're trying to achieve, and if you're really patient, as we said, and you're really lucky is a big part of it, you'll come back with something as good as you set out to get, or hopefully even better.
And I suppose the other thing to say is we work very carefully with our production partners, Evergreen Films, on really miniaturizing and simplifying the kit. It was really interesting. I was also directing Walking with Dinosaurs 3D at the same time, and I remember going from a shoot on a beach in Alaska where we were shooting the back plates to our first Ethiopian, our first shoot on this, Ethiopia, and what was interesting was, Walking with Dinosaurs was a much more classic Hollywood setup with Video Village and everything else. Yeah. And going from that crew to the crew in Ethiopia, and everything was in two little Pelican cases, and what was interesting, we had a stereographer who'd also worked on both, right? I said to him, well, what can't we do here that they could do with their full sort of Hollywood setup? He said, well, nothing. This is just easier to use because it's in two Pelican cases, and instead of lots of flappy tents and trolleys and everything else that you usually associate. So we spent a lot of time, literally, so we could chase, so you could chase monkeys, and other people have done it, like OSF chasing.
We would have liked to have had the comfy chairs and the catering and the shady tents and all that, but when the gelatos move 100 meters, that means everything has to move 100 meters. And if you're all of that kit and more, you're not very fast or efficient. So,
but what was great as well was that we kind of dreamed up our favorite, our ideal shots for each sequence, whether it was tracking along with elephants or crane shots coming down into the forest. But our partners at Evergreen were able to then put their heads together about what particular specialist 3D camera rigs they could design for us to achieve that. So I mean, on a scene like Flamingos, we were trying to get the camera really, really low at the flamingo eye level or below, and we tried some underslung slider shots from within the hide and things like that. Whereas other scenes, in the forest, we were able to do some elaborate cable dolly shots and things like that. So
you'll see some of that in the
every scene had its own sort of special.
I think the other thing that is fundamental to the success, if you want to call it that, is that we had not the luxury, because it wasn't a luxury, but the ability to try things that might not work. So often on films and in film production, you're sort of cornered by budgets and schedules and availability of talent and all these things, and you just end up sort of with the very minimal working model that will work and satisfy the need. On this one, we were given the green light to try things and invent equipment and develop techniques and technology that might or might not work. But if they did, they'd come back as shots that were unprecedented. And so that was really an important shift in the mindset of production, that really allowed everybody to be on their very best creatively, but also in terms of just, going out in the field and knowing that it was okay to try something and maybe not succeed, because in doing that, we would succeed on a number of levels.
Well, you guys did create quite a few rigs, or to achieve certain shots, or so. I'd heard an example of you were chasing a mouse, and that had to be through a handheld camera, or that might not be an exact example, but you had to go through a handheld.
That may be another BBC project, I think, where they were chasing a mouse. That would be the Hidden Kingdoms project. But we developed a number of things. The other thing that we did was to bring in Hollywood tools and techniques that aren't typically used in the natural history world. So, for example, we ran a cable descender rig down the Zambezi River about 1,000 feet and then dropped the camera over the lip of Victoria Falls. And I don't think that anyone's done it quite like that before. And for the record, I wouldn't recommend it. But it was successful in the end after a lot of pain and suffering. But so it's been a very exciting project, and we think that it should do some interesting things.
You've got another clip showing.
Yeah, we can show. So I'll just set it up quickly. This is we call it Creating the Magic clip. It's going to play off my computer, hopefully. And it's just a taste of kind of the effort and some of the locations and some of the places that went into the filming. So let's see.
And it's in 2D.
It's 2D,
It's a making behind the scenes.
You started this film about 4 years ago, right? 3D's moved quite a bit since then. So, I mean, how did you go about adapting on a shoot like that when you were moving over that amount of time and your technology was moving at the same rate?
Well, I don't think you have to make a choice at some stage in terms of technology. And although we've adapted, have improved and refined the technology, the basic technology didn't change a huge amount, except it got simpler. As the guys learned how to wire all the boxes with 2 cables instead of 28, and so on, which was amazing how it simplified, wasn't it?
And as things
Through
flamed
the whole
out,
process.
things that started as essential and flamed out in the field, and then were suddenly found to be less essential.
And the other thing, of course, was robustness, and we had remarkably little. I wouldn't say problems, but remarkably little incidents that stopped us filming, and that was down to both simplification and robustness, but absolute passion and dedication of the camera team and the camera assistants and rig technicians and so on. Every day maintaining it. As you know, it's like running a racehorse or a sports car compared to just taking a single camera out and filming with it. And I think, once you have kit that does the job and is reasonably simple, it doesn't matter what technology comes along. you know, you're locked into that. And I think Air Choices proved very, very, very sound. I mean, we were very lucky that, you know, the Epic came along literally, you know, the month we started, I think, you know, so that made a huge difference in terms of camera choice, because until that camera came, there wasn't really a suitable camera on the market for what we wanted to do. In terms of style, obviously, I mean, I suppose because we saw this very much as an immersive journey, we wanted to push the 3D, really use it in the storytelling. And so I think in terms of feature films, we're ahead of the curve, because obviously there's been so much anemic 3D. And the trend now is to use it much more creatively, and you see this in the studio films coming through now. But I think we're at that point. But I think even we have sort of pushed it more and more as we've gone along. You know, not as far as you typically would in an IMAX film, where you know you often get things which bog at your eyes occasionally. You know, but in many of them, but we certainly have pushed it, particularly the moments of sort of, you know, of flying or plunging over waterfalls and things like that, to give you those moments when you, or I think probably the most extreme 3D moment is going over the waterfall, but then along those rapids and being tipped over in the boat, you know, you really do, you actually feel, I won't say sick, but you feel a physical experience in your body when you see those shots on a big screen 3D. I
mean, we did quite early on, we did as well as look at the emotional architecture of the film, of where the high drama bits were, where the spectacle was, where the intimate moments were. We also looked at the overall 3D architecture, about where were the big kind of hit points, you know, and how we broke it up with our journeying as well, and the moments when we could rest a little bit.
And I think, too, that when we started the film, there were all kinds of sort of rules of do and don't in 3D, and you could do this, but you could never do that. And again, because we have limited control in the field, sometimes we'd be presented with opportunities, and we would just shoot it, because that's what you do, and then you figure it out later. And so we found along the way that things that we've been told you can never, ever do actually work quite well if you did it the right way. So, for example, soft focus elements in the foreground, verboten, cardinal sin in the old days. What we learned is that if you give the audience something sharp to look at in good quality 3D, they'll look right past the soft focus elements to an extent. You can't just fill the frame. But so along the way, we were sort of revisiting the rules and figuring out from our own experience what was working, what wasn't working, and then making decisions based on that. And it was hugely heartening to see films like Hugo and Hobbit and Avatar, you know, movies that were coming out and doing some of the same things. It just reinforced, you know, the choices that we were making.
Cool. I guess we can throw it out to everyone if anybody has any questions. Anyone? Yep.
I asked this before, but do you see... I asked this before with the previous group, but do you see stereo 3D as a separate art form to 2D?
No. It's because the basis is the basic storytelling, and you layer all kinds of things on, and I think 3D is something you layer onto that. I wouldn't recommend we did all nature films in 3D. You know, we'd made this very specifically as a 3D film. So the format of the film plays to the strengths of 3D, but there's so much in there that relates to all the other great wildlife films we've done. It's just one other tool.
Yeah, to enhance the experience of this adventure. Yeah.
Anybody else? Yeah, back there.
Hello, I'm looking forward to seeing this. Do you have any other BBC 3D films that you know that they're pushing forward? I'm just wondering, because the television part of BBC has sort of stopped doing the 3D televised things here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw in BBC Earth, we saw the, even 4 years ago when we were thinking about this, we saw the opportunity as a theatrical one rather than a TV one. You know, the jury was out on TV, and I think the jury sort of decided, for the time being anyway, on TV. So these are all commercial projects. We did Walking with Dinosaurs 3D that came out at Christmas globally. This one, and then we're doing a number of giant screen films. Mark Brownlow's here tomorrow, I think, talking about Hidden Kingdoms, which is a film. We've just done a television series called Hidden Kingdoms on BBC One. Separately, we were shooting a 4K 3D version of a couple of those stories, which we've turned into a we've turned into a 3D giant screen film. So that's very exciting, and that will be coming out in a few months' time. We have more plans in the giant screen arena as well.
Yep. Is there?
What advice would you give to someone looking into getting into wildlife filmography?
Into wildlife
Filmography, sorry.
Persistence and experience. I mean, it really is do you mean as a cinematographer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. There is no one route into it. You know, I think if you have no experience, it's finding cinematographers who will, you know, who you can offer something with, to work with as a camera assistant and learn from others. But there is no, and develop a portfolio of your own. I mean, I suppose the big thing now is that camera costs aren't really an issue in terms of proving what you can do. So, combination of getting experience, as much experience and breadth as you can with others, with creating your own portfolio to impress people.
I would add to that too. I mean, there's never been a better time to get your work out into the world via YouTube and Vimeo and things like that. And I'm constantly amazed when I see the Vimeo editors picks of people that have just taken a DSLR and gone out and blown my mind. So, you know, the foremost thing is just start shooting, shoot the crap out of everything and figure out what your style is, and then get it up there and get the exposure, and then find somebody who you respect and admire and see if you can't just latch onto them and learn as much as possible.
And also going to some of these wildlife film festivals like Wild Screen in Bristol or at Jackson Hole, and doing some of the voluntary work there is a really good way to get to meet people, see some of the workshops and the films, and that's very good.
Anybody else? Not missing anybody, am I?
Someone in the middle.
Oh, yeah, sorry. To see you.
Hello. Did you have to dimensionalise any of the really long lens stuff?
Yeah, we did. So what we often did was we often had, and this was something evolved actually over the period. We often had a 2D camera alongside, getting the big close-ups. So, and I think that's what distinguishes this film perhaps from some of the previous natural history. Generally, they've been IMAX or giant screen films. Is building really dramatic sequences, whereas Verity, you need lots of different size shots. And what we've been absolutely so impressed with, we got Legend to dimensionalize the shots, is the care of those guys and the way they've integrated I keep asking Myles, was that 2D? Was that 3D? I mean, some of the professional post stereographers can tell. I can't tell, and some of those I've forgotten. And it's amazing how that's literally how that's come on during the quality of that has come on during the period of production, and so that's worked very effectively for us to actually cut much more dramatic sequences than have traditionally been the case in 3D giant screen films before, for example, which are really the only 3D natural history films.
I think if you have a trained technical eye, and I mean you have to train yourself to see some of this stuff, it's very subtle. You'll probably see some small artifacts here and there, but the reality is that that's not the audience we're making the film for. We're making a film for ticket-buying families and kids, and they will just be immersed in the 3D experience and they'll fall in love with it, and that's what's most important for us. So, when we go into this, we absolutely took a hybrid approach. We shot everything natively that we could, but audiences have expectations because they've seen some of these landmark projects on television like Planet Earth and Life and things like that. So if we don't deliver on a certain amount of that expectation, then we're letting them down. So the hybrid approach was really the key to success for us. And as Neil said, we were always shooting natively wherever possible, but then we'd have longer lens stuff. And it just allowed us flexibility in the cutting room to make the most of the sequences.
Cool. Well, I think we're pretty much out of time. But thank you very much for coming down and showing us that. I think it looks great.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.